The applause echoed through the hall. But none of it was for me. My name is Arielle Nguyen. I'm 25, and I just graduated top of my class in architecture. 6 years of balancing part-time jobs, all-nighters, and fighting the quiet war inside me that whispered, "You're still not enough." 6 years for a name they didn't bother to show up for. The ceremony was beautiful. The dean gave a heartfelt speech. My classmates posed for proud photos with their families. There were bouquets, balloons, tears. Me? I sat in the third row, aisle seat, alone. My chair had a folded name card, but the two beside it stayed empty. I'd saved them for my mom and dad, even though I should have known better. They had other things to do. The bakery needed prepping for Sunday orders. Tyler, my younger brother, had just gotten a speeding ticket. Apparently, that required a family meeting. No text, no call, not even a good luck. So when my name was called for the graduate honors speech, I stood up, walked to the stage, and smiled. At no one. I still gave the speech. Still thanked the mentors who stayed up late to help. Still thanked my imaginary support system, because it felt less humiliating than saying the truth. Success is not always measured by who cheers for you. Sometimes it's about who still shows up. When the cheering stops, that's how I ended it, my voice steady, my hands cold. After the ceremony, I stayed behind. Everyone else left for brunch. Photos, champagne, hugs. I sat at the back of the hall, still in my cap and gown, trying not to cry too hard in case the janitor came in. And that's when she walked up to me, a woman, late 70s maybe, white curls tucked under a knit beret, wearing a faded cardigan with daisies on the sleeve. She didn't say much, just held out a small white envelope. "You dropped this," she said. I looked up. "I don't think I..." But she was already walking away. There was no name on it. Just the words, "For the one who still believes in building what's been forgotten." Inside, a single brass key, old and slightly bent, and a sticky note with coordinates written in black ink. I stared at it for a long time, trying to make sense of it. Was it a joke? Some kind of graduation stunt? Or was it something else? Because somehow, deep down, I didn't feel mocked, I felt seen. That night I didn't go home, I drove. I didn't know where I was going, only that the numbers on the sticky note pointed somewhere. Just outside the city, a place I'd never been, a place no one else had invited me to. But maybe, just maybe, it was the first invitation, meant only for me. It took nearly 2 hours of winding roads and gravel turns. But I found it, tucked behind a line of abandoned train tracks, just past mile marker 83. No signs, no neighbors, just a rusted black gate with faded letters barely clinging to metal. Old Marlow Public Library. The building was small, one-story brick, cracked in places, with vines creeping along the windows like they were trying to hide it from the world. A place everyone had forgotten, like it had been erased quietly, in a town too busy remembering other things. I parked, got out, held the key in my palm. It felt cold but steady, and when I slid it into the lock, it clicked. Like it had been waiting, the door groaned open, dust filled the air, carrying the scent of old paper, a wet wood, and something familiar. The kind of familiar you don't recognize until your chest tightens, and you realize you've missed it your whole life. Inside, rows of bookshelves stood like tired soldiers, some leaning, some collapsed. A cracked globe lay on its side beside a broken desk, and near the far wall, a single reading lamp still upright, its cord unplugged, its bulb covered in cobwebs. But what caught my breath wasn't any of that. It was the architect's table, in the center of the room, covered in yellowing blueprints, design sketches, floor plans of something unfinished, something beautiful, and on top of them, a note handwritten, in the same script as the sticky note from the envelope. This was once a dream. Maybe you can finish it. No signature, no instructions, just silence, and the kind of stillness that feels like permission. I didn't sleep that night. I stayed. In the library, in that dust and quiet, tracing every line of those sketches, reading through margin notes like someone decoding another person's heartbeat. It was a plan for a community space, a hybrid between a maker's lab, an art studio, and a youth center. Free access, no judgment, design belongs to everyone. That's what one corner of the page said. And I knew, with a certainty I couldn't explain. This wasn't a random gift, this was a calling. The next morning, I bought cleaning supplies, masks, gloves, a broom. I scrubbed every surface I could reach, cleared out cobwebs, opened the windows, let the light find its way back in. There was no one to help me, no budget, no big announcement, just a girl with a key, and a forgotten building that somehow felt like it remembered her. I filed paperwork to lease the property. Turns out the county had no plans for it. They said I could rent it for $1 a year if I used it for educational or public benefit. I signed that lease with hands still dirty from dust and glue, smiling, because for the first time in my life, a door had opened for me, and only me. I called it the Bricklight House, a place where overlooked kids could create, where second chances didn't have to be earned. They were offered freely, where no one needed a portfolio to walk in, just a little spark. At first, it was just me and a dusty table, an unplugged lamp, and a dream I wasn't sure would matter to anyone but me. But then, they started coming. One by one, kids who didn't fit in anywhere else. Teenagers whose report cards were covered in red ink, but whose sketchbooks held entire worlds. A single mom who used to paint murals before her third job swallowed her time. A boy named Leo, 13, barely spoke, but built a 3D model of a city from cardboard and tape. I asked him where it was. He shrugged. Nowhere, just a place that's fair. That's when I knew. This wasn't about art. This was about recognition, about giving the unseen a space to be undeniable. And so every Saturday, we held open hours. No tuition, no resumes, no one asking, "How good are you?" Just a room full of people who were tired of asking for permission to matter. I used my savings from freelance work to buy supplies, paint, graphite, donated tablets from a nonprofit in Denver. The back room became a tiny digital studio. The corner wall turned into a gallery space. We called it the no-name exhibit, because here you didn't need a title to be worthy of a wall. Then one day, the newspaper came. They ran a feature, small piece, local spotlight. Former top architecture grad turns abandoned library into free creative hub for underserved youth. They asked me why I did it. I said, because someone once gave me a key, when everyone else gave me silence. That story spread. We got calls, volunteers, sponsors, and someone else, someone I hadn't heard from in over a year. The doorbell rang on a rainy Thursday. I opened it, and there she was, my mother, wearing her bakery apron like it was still flour-covered armor. No umbrella, just standing there, holding a grocery bag filled with, what? Fun noodles, a pie, like we were still family. I didn't speak, just opened the door wide enough for rain to sneak in. But not her. She stepped back a little surprised. I saw the article, she said. Didn't know you were doing all this. Her eyes scanned the inside of Bricklight. The shelves, the drawings on the wall, the laughter of kids down the hall, Then her voice softened. Your father and I. We're proud, we just didn't realize how serious this all was. I wanted to laugh, not cruelly, just tired. I stared at her for a long second before replying. It was serious when I asked you to come to my graduation. It was serious when I walked across the stage alone. She looked down, then came the real reason. We're actually in a bit of a tough place. There it was, the pivot. Tyler's shop isn't doing well. He wants to open a second location to reach more customers. We thought, maybe with your connections now, you could help. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't close the door. I just said, you missed the build. You don't get to claim the foundation. You skipped the moment I needed you most. Not because you couldn't come, but because you chose not to. She opened her mouth, closed it again. Rain dripped off her sleeves. I handed her the bag back, politely. Then shut the door, not in anger, in peace, because I didn't need her to understand, not anymore. I had already built something that didn't depend on her applause. A month after that rainy day, a letter arrived, cream-colored envelope. No return address, just my name, Arielle Nguyen, handwritten in looping script. My stomach dropped. Because I knew that handwriting, I'd only seen it once before. On a sticky note, taped to a brass key, I opened it slowly. Inside, a short letter, written in pen, careful and neat. The kind of writing that makes you pause. Not because it's perfect, but because it feels intentional. Dear Arielle, you don't know me, not really. We only met once after your graduation. But I knew who you were the moment I saw you give that speech, standing on stage with no one in your row. You reminded me of someone I once was before the world told me to shrink. The Bricklight House. It was my husband's dream. We bought that library together in 1978. Wanted to turn it into a place where creativity didn't have to audition. But then he passed, and I couldn't finish it alone, so I left it in limbo. Until the day I saw you stand tall in your silence. I didn't give you the key because I pitied you. I gave it to you because you were already unlocking something no one else could see. And now, I have one last thing to give. Meet me Saturday, 10 a.m., the greenhouse behind the library. Come alone. I read the letter 3 times, heart racing, palms sweating. Who was she, and what else could she possibly have to give? Saturday came. I woke up before the sun. Wore my softest sweater, the one that made me feel like I still belonged to myself. The greenhouse behind the library was barely standing. Its glass panes cloudy with age. Its frame warped from years of snow and silence. But when I pushed the creaky side door open, she was already there, sitting at a weathered wooden table, a thermos of tea beside her, and 2 mugs. She smiled like she had been expecting me for years. M is for Miriam, she said, and you're right on time. I sat down, not quite sure what to say. She poured tea like it was a ceremony. No rush, no small talk, just the sound of the greenhouse settling around us. I'm not here to give you praise, Miriam said. You don't need more of that. I'm here because legacy isn't just about what we leave behind. It's about who we trust to carry it forward. She reached into a satchel, pulled out a red folder. Inside, property deeds, incorporation papers, nonprofit registration. You've already been running the Bricklight House. Now it's yours, legally, entirely, and I'll fund the first 3 years of your operating costs. I blinked. I thought I had misheard her. She chuckled softly. I've watched you, every week. Through that back window, how you talk to those kids, how you wipe down every table yourself before they arrive, how you pause before speaking like you're still getting used to being heard. I was you once, she said, the invisible one. Until one person saw me, and now I see you. My throat tightened. I wanted to say thank you, but the words caught somewhere between disbelief and something deeper. Recognition. We sat there for almost 2 hours, drinking tea, talking about light fixtures and heartbreak, and how some families never see the people right in front of them until the world forces them to. Before I left, she handed me a second key. Smaller, silver. For the basement, she said. There's something else down there you might want to finish. Later that night, I unlocked the basement door. The steps groaned under my weight, but the air felt charged, like it remembered something. And there, under a dusty tarp, was a half-built model, a miniature version of Bricklight, but bigger, brighter. At the base was a plaque carved in wood, a place for the ones they always forget. That's when I knew. This wasn't just a building. It was a promise, passed from one forgotten woman to another, and I would make sure it reached the next. 6 months later, the Bricklight house wasn't just surviving, it was alive. The leaky roof was fixed. The gallery had rotating exhibits. We started offering weekend programs, digital design, urban sketching, storytelling through space. The once crumbling library was now full of color, music, and voices no one had ever asked to speak, now refusing to be silenced. I hired 3 part-time staff, local artists, people who didn't have fancy degrees, but knew what it meant to fight for a creative life. We created a scholarship fund for undocumented teens, added a community fridge, started a mentorship program, and then came the letter. It was from one of the kids, Leo, the quiet boy who built a cardboard city. He left it on my desk, folded in half, written in pencil like he wasn't sure it would matter. Miss Ari, you probably don't remember, but the first time I came here, I didn't talk. I was scared someone would say I wasn't supposed to be here. But you didn't ask for a name, you just said, take whatever you need. Now I talk. Now I draw. Now I want to be an architect like you. My mom says I laugh more. Thank you for building a place I never thought would exist. A place where no one asks if I'm enough, because they already decided I am. When I grow up, I want to be the person who leaves the key. Leah. I sat at my desk for a long time, holding that letter like it was a sacred thing, because it was. It was the kind of recognition I never got, from the people who shared my last name. But maybe that's what poetic justice really is. Not revenge, not even an apology, just proof that you didn't need their permission to matter. I never reopened the door to my old life, never sent updates, never chased closure. The silence from them was loud. But my new life, it was louder. It was messy, joyful, tiring. And mine, I don't know where Miriam is now. She moved shortly after signing everything over, left no forwarding address. Just a final message on a sticky note taped to the studio mirror. You were always the builder. I just handed you the key. So now, every December, instead of celebrating my graduation day, I host a new tradition. The Day of Keys. We close the Bricklight to the public, but open it to those who once stood outside doors they thought would never open. Each visitor leaves with a small, blank brass key, not for a lock, but for a promise. A reminder. You were never invisible. You were just waiting for the right door. To anyone listening, if your name was skipped, if your seat was left empty, if your success was met with silence, or your dreams dismissed as distractions, I want you to hear this clearly. You are not what they forgot. You are what you chose to become anyway. And someday, someone like you will need a key. Make sure you're the one holding it. When the time comes,